everybody! Hello, 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 hello. I welcome you into my show so you can have some fun. Hi, everybody. I told you I was just taking a break. I told you I'd be back in a minute. It just so happens, sometimes, a minute lasts an hour and a half. I wonder if this video is on my Discord server. Not my Discord server, but I wonder if it's on DP's Discord. DP. Where is it? There it is. Not finding it yet. Not finding it yet. Darn. Darn. Dang, I couldn't find it. Anyway, I can't wait till some people get in here. We can start having some conversation, and then we can start talking in again. Maybe somebody will want to ask me about some stuff about the Joey discussion, or maybe somebody will want to do an early morning super chat. Either way, I'm pleased to welcome you all to the morning show. Hello, hi, Emma B. Welcome to the morning show. The happiest place on the internet. No, I'm kidding. It's definitely not the happiest place on the internet, but it's the most manic at this time, at this moment, at this spot in the timeline. It's definitely higher energy than healthy. But that's okay. You know what? I have too much energy. I give it to some of you guys. He's back again. She's back again. Hi. I was just sitting here listening to the Brett Keane video that he did about me and that Drunken Peasants covered. That silly, silly old manatee. Are you trans? Yes, I am a trans woman. You're gorgeous. Aw, thank you. Bonjour, madame. Bonjour. As long as you stay out of women's spaces, why would I do that? On what basis would you exclude me? I mean, I guess if a specific space of women wants to exclude me in particular, that's fine. Although, make you mean. Thanks for having me on earlier. Hope to do it more. Of course, Joey, of course. Thank you for the $2. That's Joey, the Maga conservative fan of the channel that we had on earlier for a 4-hour-long series of discussions that constitute the last 2 or 3 streams that happened on the channel. So definitely go check those out if you guys want to see a really fascinating conversation between 2 people who disagree on a lot, but who maybe share some fundamental axioms, and we're able to come to some pretty interesting conclusions and have some pretty interesting conversations along the way. If that sounds interesting to you, please go check those out. Hi, are you trans? I just asked her, I feel like I just answered this like 2 seconds ago. Yes, I'm a trans woman. When did you think you were a girl? I've known the whole time, as long as I've had a conception of gender. Confidently using axioms in a sentence is pretty badass, not gonna lie. Just wait around for a while. You'll see me employ even more lexical poeticisms. Don't listen to the trolls? I don't. I use them as content fodder. Like this. Gabe, when is Half-Life 3 coming out? That's a really funny joke. You should try it again and see if it gets a laugh. Christ is king? I'm not even sure that Christ as described in the Bible ever existed. Certainly there was a heretical Jewish rabbi who was strung up by the Romans 2,000 years ago, but was he the Son of God? Was he the same Jesus described in the Bible? I think all of that remains to be proven, and even if it was proven that it was the same guy, it wouldn't prove anything. Sabbatai Zevi very nearly met the same exact fate as Jesus at the hand of Islamic state power rather than Roman pagan state power. And if Sabbatai Zevi hadn't converted, who knows? Maybe there'd be a whole new sect of heretical Judaism going around claiming that it's got divine right and authority. But Sabbatai Zevi chose to convert, and as a result, we don't have to deal with that. We don't have to deal with another branching off of yet another cult from far away that is branching itself into all different walks of life and cultures. Well, I'm definitely not going to say that I've read, everything there is to read, but I have read the Bible. I've read quite a bit of the historical context surrounding the Bible. Ooh. Sorry. All right. So this is the violent coughing part of YouTube. Sick, bruh. I mean, it's not usually. Usually I remember to press the cough button, but it caught me this time. Do you plan on making yourself more feminine presenting? I think that, probably every trans woman wants to, continuously make themselves more femme according to their internal reflection of what they want to see. So yeah, I mean, like, one of the things I want to do is get back on hormone replacement therapy, which I haven't been able to be on since 2020, late 2020. And that I'm sure will have a pretty tremendous effect over time. And I definitely at some point want to start going to a stylist for my hair rather than just doing it myself, because it's looking increasingly worse over time. Like, for a while there, it was actually looking nice, but I don't know what I did to it the other day. I slept on it weird, and ever since it has been fucked. So, what do all the colors on the flag mean? I'm not Google, honey. I'm not Google. Broadly, these ones are for trans people. The black and brown ones are for the liberation of black and brown communities and the intersection between anti-racism and queer advocacy. And the other colors are just reflections of the original colors of the gay pride flag, which all had their own unique meanings and have been kind of widened in their interpretation to include more of the queer community over time. So, like, I don't know, it means a lot of different things. You would have to look into it. Like, I think, I believe Pride House has a page on their website dedicated to explaining what all the different colors on the different queer flags mean, if you're interested in looking into it specifically. Also, just so you know, I do read every single super chat. If you want to support the channel, that is probably the best way to do it, because I do read every single one, as long as you follow YouTube's basic terms of service. So consider doing that if you want to make sure that I answer one of your questions. It's also just a great way to make sure that I can continue making this sort of content that you all must find so interesting to come see it as much as you tend to. Come on, phone. Stay where I put you. Hi, Phoebe. How are yous? I am awesome. I'm very manic today. I think that's because I'm slowly, like, running out of weed, and so I'm, like, smoking less and starting to, like, go through the, like, nervous section of the tolerance break. But whatever. Regardless of the reason, I've got extra energy and I'm pouring it into the stream tonight. I make better content, LOL. I admit, the all caps are very convincing. God, people are so rude. I know. All I'm doing is sitting here, talking to the chat, trying my best to have an interesting conversation with you guys. And some people are just so overly fixated on my gender identity, or who I might be having sex with, or what kind of flag I got in my background. And even when they're not hyper fixated, it's still like, me and Joey had a wonderful 4-hour-long conversation, Joey being a Maga conservative, me being a far-left anarchist, and we had 4 hours worth of conversation where we never insulted each other. And it's incredible to me how few people are capable of living up to that standard, which is really not that high. It's got to be easier to deal with haters when you know they couldn't explain why they hold a single belief or ideal they have. That's exactly why it's so easy to deal with these people. Because once you interrogate them, many of them just fall apart immediately. Many of them aren't even capable of answering the interrogation that you're trying to put them through. They're not capable of following along with it. And as a result, they either stop responding completely, or they respond in a way that makes their argument fold before your very eyes. And it also is made blatantly obvious to everyone else that's watching and might be interacting or reading the chat at that time that they're not coming at it with something that is substantive or worthwhile for consideration, which makes my witty little quips and dismissals all the more effective. What does the genocidal state of Israel have to do with transgender people, Tyler? Good morning, Autumn. You're a walking CIA psyop, follow the money. I have followed the money, and where the money leads me is to a bunch of organizations through the years who have worked their level-headed best to try and suppress queer representation and to try and instill backwards Bronze Age Christian bullshit into the moralities of all kinds of other countries. Do you know how much the CIA has done and our intelligence agencies and shit have done to try and influence the various nations of Africa into adopting Christian moral codes and theocracies? Do you realize how much our government has done towards making people hate people like me? So when I follow the money, what I find is not gay people being propped up by the CIA. I actually find us being persecuted by the CIA. I find queer people of all different kinds, not just transgender people, being persecuted by the CIA, being manipulated and insidered by the CIA, not being supported or uplifted by the CIA, hardly the opposite. The opposite, in fact, was what was happening. But true facts tend to be pretty inconvenient for the conservative mindset. Yep, you're just an indoctrinated fool, Tyler. You've been sold a false bill of sale. You believe every word of it because you're not capable of critically thinking. And so when your grandparents and your parents told you to hate communists, you did, uncritically, without ever bothering to Google or look up in an encyclopedia what the fuck a communist is. When people have told you to hate queer people, you have, without ever critically questioning it, probably because you yourself are queer in some way and are not allowed to express those feelings because you know it would lead to the complete cutoff of all your social networks, or because you find it more convenient to agree with the backwards social lines of the people around you than it would be to stand up for human rights. I cannot imagine being such a ghoulish person, and I feel for you and your family, and I hope that someday you learn how to be a normal person who appreciates other people's rights to life and humanity and the ability to live a dignified human life. Kitty, I can't have you up here right now. You know better. Thank you, Autumn, for being a member for 10 months. I appreciate that a ton. In 10 months, let's go. Conservatives like Tyler can't handle the truth. No. You can't handle the truth. It's true. They really, like, they just can't. If they could, they wouldn't be conservatives, you know? It's kind of how it works. Or they would at least be more truthful conservatives who aren't nearly so concerned with how other people are living their lives and how they choose to express their gender. What is your opinion on me finding transgender people scary or unsettling? You're probably just a product of a lot of propaganda that has been, like, literally intended and designed to make us scary and unsettling. That's all. There's nothing intrinsically scary or unsettling about a transgender person. Like me, myself, when I first started, like, interacting with trans people, I didn't grow up with, like, a whole bunch of, like, super specific, constantly preached transphobia. It came up a few times, but I never found trans people to be off-putting. And in fact, I found them to be fascinating. Um, Quite the opposite of off-putting. And I feel like that probably is reflective of a broader trend, that if you are raised in a household that is very homophobic or very transphobic or both, you're way more likely to find trans people unsettling once you become an adult, even if you get outside that direct exposure kind of environment where you're just constantly, day in and day out, hearing the preaching of backwards, small-minded conservative people. Ultimately, the best thing you can do is just, like, exposure therapy. Just, like, listen to some other interviews with trans people. I tell you what, go watch Luxander Moss, who is a non-binary kind of, like, transfemme activist content creator person here on YouTube. Many more subscribers than I've got, but she's really cool. You can watch the Transatlantic Call-In show over on The Line, and they actually have a trans man over there who is a medical doctor. If you would like to hear some of the, like, medical breakdown of the study behind transgender people and the multitudes of different studies and case studies and cumulative reports and things that have been done that have confirmed time and time again the veracity of transgender people's experiences. Phoebe, what does an anarchical society look like to you? One that is governed, like, completely and ultimately democratically. One where broader systems that coordinate massive, country-level kind of things are reduced to whatever, like, bare-bones things need to be done on that level, and decisions that are made to... Thanks, kitty. I appreciate that a lot. Anyway, I think that decisions that are made to influence that broader federal or national system, or whatever you would call it, should be made ultimately democratically. It's probably going to take a lot longer than it does right now, but there would also be no need for a constant, consistent representative class, much like the Iroquois confederacies of the eastern woodland nations before the arrival of the colonizers. I think that you can establish a society that works without the monopolized state force that kind of defines the modern state, while achieving better outcomes, meaningfully better outcomes for the people that live within these systems. So what would it look like? It would look less like you going to work for some giant multinational corporation where the vast majority of the money that you make and the profit that you generate goes away to some other place, and instead you might be working at the same kind of place, but you would be working better hours for way better pay. You would actually have a chunk of the ownership of that business. And if you ever wanted to change where you worked, it'd probably be a little harder to change jobs than it is now, simply because people would be so much more ready to hold on to their jobs for long term. That would probably also reduce the likelihood of people job hopping to begin with. Ultimately, I think that with the amount of technology that we have today and the combination of automation and AI, whatever anarcho-syndicalist society is formed, probably long after my death, is going to have to accommodate for the fact that there's just tons of human jobs that are not going to be useful anymore, that are not going to be necessary, because it's going to be so much more sensible and humane to have robots doing these things instead. In fact, I think that development is going to necessitate a move to at least market socialism within the next 5 to 10 years. And I think that anarcho-syndicalism is the next natural step after that. Eventually, workers take over the means of production, including AI, and we actually, at that point, have a slice of how money is made in our society and how resources flow throughout it. What are your thoughts on animal rights? Um, I'm a big supporter of animal rights, but I think I'm sometimes considered a bit of an unconventional supporter of animal rights, because I think that, like, animal rights can include the idea that something might get eaten at the end of its life. I think to say otherwise is to be intrinsically speciest. To say that human beings, because basically to say that it's wrong to eat animals under any circumstances is to say that human beings are the only species that does not have a right on any level to eat any other species. And that just doesn't track. That's just not, that doesn't make sense. Like, even animals with super high degrees of sentience still eat meat sometimes. So I think that when it comes to what rights animals have, I think that it should probably scale with the amount of sentience that we're talking about. You don't quite need to worry quite as much about the emotional experience of a snow crab as you do about the emotional experience of a cow, for example. But I also think that any discussion of animal rights needs to take into account two things. Number one, the personhood of animals, and number two, the fact that animals, non-human animals, have vastly different needs than human beings, for the most part. House cats being one of the notable, well, house cats and modern dogs being the two notable exceptions. There are some dog species that can survive as strays. There are some cats that can survive as strays. But if you actually look into it, most strays die. The vast majority of them die without living a full life. They die of some kind of preventable thing, right? And they are just not built, right? So human beings, cats, and dogs are pretty much the only animals that need human standards of living, so to speak, meaning like a specific type of house infrastructure and all this other stuff to be happy and healthy. Whereas if you tried to subject a horse, for example, to the rigors of trying to live in a human home, it would just, I mean, you'd drive the fucking horse insane. Horses benefit from having a stable they can go into that's got plenty of room for them to, walk around and do some little, like, pacing in and stuff if they need to at night. But they need a bunch of space that they can roam around in as well, right? So, like, we've got two things to consider here. One, the sentience of so many animals that people just tend to not consider, regardless of their position in this debate. And two, the very different needs of non-human animals from our particular species of primate. I do want to make a quick correction. There are insects and rodents that are fully dependent on humans. Yeah, although I don't know if there are any distinct species that are as a whole. I don't know. Is the New York subway rat recognized as its own species yet? Maybe there are. I'm not sure about rodents. Because I'm pretty sure that, like, most species of, in fact, as far as I know, all the species of rodent that live with humans can also theoretically live without us, but you can correct me if you've got specific examples. I would love to know. Certainly there are some insects that would die off without us. Head lice, for example, are specifically adapted to just the human scalp. But I don't think anybody's going to be starting up any animal rights discussions surrounding the head louse anytime soon. I don't know why my regular Prism chat suddenly stopped working, but I guess I'll just read it off of this phone. Found your channel the other day and was listening to you talk. What's the name of that 8-hour audiobook again? God is something? Yeah, it's called God is Not Great. It's by Christopher Hitchens. I like your thoughts on animal rights. I hope you're not gay. I'm bisexual. I really don't care what anybody else thinks about it. Right, for sure. Yeah, no, I get it. I was mostly talking about like higher order mammals, and like higher order animals, I guess. But yeah, no, I get it. There are a number of different species that do like need human cohabitation. But at this point, I think that, well, actually, maybe it is an interesting thing to go into, right? Because I've been kind of wondering over the last couple of years, right? We know rats are incredibly smart. Mice are incredibly smart. They are very attracted to our homes. And I can't lie, I have yet to discover a way to kill or get rid of rats and mice that seems humane. You know, like there's some that are more humane than others, but they all kind of seem like all the poisons induce these very slow deaths that if the rat or mouse ends up going outside of your home to die, there's a good chance it gets eaten by some predator or by a scavenger, and then that thing gets sick. Even if it dies within your house, there's only specific kinds of poison that prevent it from stinking up your house, and even then sometimes, depending on the conditions, you can end up with a stinky house anyway. If you've got the like snap traps, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. It's still kind of seems like a brutalist way to kill an animal, especially one that you're not using for anything. You're just kind of killing for its presence in your home. And so I guess there's a part of me that's beginning to wonder as time goes on if maybe our approach to this whole pest issue is just fundamentally inhumane, and if we need to completely change how we do things, just like as a society. And I think that I've been having a lot of these thoughts about not just pest control, but lots of different areas. And it's just kind of hard to talk about them because the Overton window in America is so fucking far to the right that once you start talking about anything leftist, like let alone some radical environmentalist stuff, people get triggered about that shit. People get salty, really salty about it. So sometimes I think I feel hesitant to talk about some of these things because it's like, oh, well, what's the point in talking about a beautiful, deep green eco-society that we could build together when I can't even get so many people to agree on the basic idea of climate change? Saying you're bi just means you're confused? No, I'm not confused. I've gotten equally turned off from giving people with penises head and, you know, getting penetrated by people with penises as I have from penetrating people with vaginas and giving them head. So, I don't know, man. Seems like you might be the confused one. There's so many people in the chat that I'm sure agree with me, but they're just insulting you with insults that don't even make sense, and I'm sorry about that. It's not your fault. But if you want to make up for it, you know, you can always send a super chat or a Cash App donation to make up for it. You know, it's always on offer. But I don't blame you. I know it's not like your fault. It's not like you made them do it. Do you touch grass, honestly? I touch way more grass than your average human being just because I live in the country and I live on kind of like a little, I guess you'd call it a farmette, maybe a miniature homestead. But there's lots of stuff that is like outdoorsy and fucking needs doing every day, so I probably touch a pretty abnormally high level of grass compared to the average internet denizen. Yeah, bi is not confused. It's like saying liking chocolate milk enjoyers and strawberry milk enjoyers are confused. Yeah, it makes no sense at all. It's like, you like chocolate and vanilla ice cream both? How dare you? You're just confused. If you really thought about it, you'd find that you like one more than the other. And even if that were true, that would not eliminate their liking for the other, so it still doesn't make any sense. The silliness of people. You are a trans woman? I'm confused. Yes, I'm a trans woman. Is that a wig? No. What kind of wig would have my bangs all fucked up? Refresh, everybody. We back. We back, we back, we back. We is back. We is back. Why you don't put effort on passing? I do. What are you talking about? Like, what specifically about my presentation do you take issue with? I'm just curious. I know. Go ahead and refresh, everybody. Refresh, refresh, refresh. Type refresh in the chat if you can see me. There you go. I see somebody saying refresh, so that's good. Refurbish. Refresh. Refurbish. Okay, I'm sorry then. Maybe your voice, but I don't want to be rude. See, that's a weird thing to me. To me, my voice does not sound masculine at all. It's deeper than I would like it to be, but at the same time, I don't feel like it's so deep that it's like critical that I change it. I've met cis women with voices deeper than my own, and I don't find that my countenance feels to me altogether masculine. But I have heard other people report this before, so I guess it's just like interesting to see the trend holding up. You know what I'm more curious about? The unique 3 or whatever your name is why you care so desperately much about what another human being does with their body or their clothes or their hairstyle or anything else. How does it affect you? I think your voice sounds fine. It's about the intelligence level of the words that come out, not the sound. Yeah, exactly. And somebody said it's not about deep, it's about resonance. I don't know. My mom is a cis lady, and she's got a pretty, like, resonant voice when she wants to. I don't know if I'm using resonant in the right way. Maybe I've got a misunderstanding about what resonance means. Excuse me. Well, actually, the unique, you could definitely say you're any of those things. I mean, it's not going to be treated as seriously as like a trans person coming out as trans, because like when it comes to trans people, there's over 100 years of scientific research into the experiences of trans people and like the verisimilitude of our condition. how gender dysphoria works, how it affects people, how much better they feel when they are able to have a body that reflects what they like identify with on like internally. Once you like start to mend that internal external mismatch with stunning regularity, trans people are better. They live longer, happier lives. And I'm sorry if there's some people that disagree with the science behind this, but it's, like I said, well-established science. We've been researching the veracity of trans people longer than we've been doing open heart surgery. We've been researching the veracity of trans people for far longer than we've had a polio vaccine. Unique doesn't want to convince me, and to be fair, it would be kind of a pointless endeavor. When it comes to my existence as a trans woman, I know it as intrinsically as I know any other fact I know about myself. And it is mountains of scientific research that back up the idea that other people feel the same way. The fact that, like, it makes sense that I felt so much better when I was on hormone replacement therapy, because, like, there's, like I said, mountains of research to back up all these things. My experiences make complete sense within the context of a, like, fully equipped scientific understanding of gender, sex, and the many complexities therein. So it's like, it would be kind of a little bit of a wasted effort, because, like, you're not, like, you're probably not a doctor. And even if a doctor were to, like, prove their credentials to me and try and make an impassioned argument, at the end of the day, I'm still going to be, like, asking them, like, I'm still going to have to pull up so many different studies and be like, let's go through this study and see what you disagree with on the methodology on this. And at the end of the day, I somehow doubt that even a doctor, single, lonely, and by themselves, would be able to make any kind of cogent argument that is going to defeat the just utter, like, compendium of consensus surrounding this issue. No, it's not just they rarely overcome dysphoria, they pretty much never overcome dysphoria. They become hollow shells of themselves, basically. Are you autistic, respectfully? Yeah. Yes. I know this is how you get the attention you want, but look what you've done to yourself. Bruh. I got more than enough attention before I came out as trans. And I was trans for 5 years before I ever started live streaming. If you go back to the earliest videos on my channel, a lot of the earliest videos on my channel are made before I came out as trans. There's actually a cover of Alice in Chains, Nutshell, that me and my friend Colin did about 6 months before I came out as trans. If you want to see like what I looked at like right before. And like I said, I've gotten plenty of attention throughout my whole life before ever coming out as trans. If you really want to know something I did for attention, it's back there. It's not right here, it's back there. The guitar, my friend. That's the real attention-seeking thing you should be noticing. Me being trans, like, honestly, like, if I could just wake up tomorrow and I was, like, a cis woman and, like, nobody could tell any different, that'd be perfectly fine with me. I mean, I like being openly trans and being a trans advocate, and I would like to think that even if that were to happen, I would continue being an advocate for trans women. But at the same time, you know, if I had that happen, I ain't gonna complain about it. Have you been on, Have you been on HRT that whole time, or did you identify openly as trans before medication? Before medication. And then when I lost the ability to be on HRT, I didn't, like, detransition, so. You know, I haven't played anything on the guitar lately, and I'm kind of thinking that it might be fun to do some music. I'm debating on it. Oh, I literally hate it so fucking much when someone reveals that everything they're saying just ties back to their religious nonsense. I don't give a shit about your weird Jewish martyr from the Middle East from 2,000 years ago. I never will. I never will. I'm sorry. I grew up on that bullshit. I rejected it because it was horrifying, stupid, and untrue to an obvious degree. And I recommend you do the same and deconstruct your faith instead of continuing forth trying to institute rules that other people should follow on the basis of your erroneous assumptions about how the world works. And to that end, I shall give you some time to think about it. I mean, if you really want to keep arguing with me, you can pay the $2.20 to join the membership. But something tells me you're not gonna. Wow, Unique, you are actually dumb. That's the thing, man. This chat attracts some of the stupidest, most insufferable people on the planet. And we just have to sort through them until we arrive at someone good. Like you, or Wardens. Look at that. Hi, Wardens. Greetings, infidels. Infidel reporting for duty. Doesn't infidel just basically mean atheist? Or is there a distinction in the Islamic world? Oh, thank you for the 67 jewels. 6-7. 6-7. 6-7. 6, 6, 7. 6, 7. 6, 7. 6, 7. 6, 7. 6, 6, 7, 7, 6, 6, 7, 6, 7. a 66776. Non-believer. So do they have a different word for atheist? I wonder how the Islamic world treats an atheist. Like if you're like an atheist from birth, I mean. Assuming you don't blaspheme within a country that recognizes like the Dini system. Like is an atheist that I'm not talking about an apostate, but I'm talking about like just standard atheist. These are the things I wonder about late at night when the sun is rising, peeking over the valley. What am I kidding? I don't live in a fucking valley. There's no topographical relief in this state. It's all flatlands, rolling hills, canals. That's basically Venice, but worse. Way bigger mosquitoes. Place a shithole. Being an atheist in the Middle East is generally very dangerous and difficult. Religion is deeply tied to law, family, and social identity. That reads like an AI overview. Wardens, if I wanted to fucking get an AI overview, you motherfucker, I'd just look it up myself. I've been meaning to do this. Well, thank you, Potterhead. Actually, genuinely thank you. That's really cool of you. I always tell people, it genuinely does offer you a lot of value. I can't think of another YouTuber who charges this little for their membership and gives you as much as I do. Like, there's all kinds of members-only live streams that I've done in the past that you can watch if you like my content. If you get to thinking, like, maybe I want to look back through some of this stuff. Maybe I want to see what she was talking about around this time that this news story was going on. Plus, you get access to these chats, which is the big thing. So I appreciate the support. He's actually not wrong, though. Well, no, I know he's not wrong. I was just joking, Wardens. I was just joking. Yeah, no, that's what I was saying. But what I wonder, though, is I guess I would be trying to ask, like, under, like, the DMI system specifically, DHIMMI, because under so my understanding is that in countries with that system in place, basically people that aren't Muslim, are allowed to live there, but they have to pay this like certain, it's like a jizya or something, a certain tax that they have to pay under that system. And I just wonder if that would apply to an atheist in that same situation, or if like their non-alliance with the religion would be a problem in and of itself. But that also makes me wonder how Islam in particular treats the idea of the non-believer. And from my understanding, Islam has contradictory things to say about the non-believer. My understanding is that the Quran is very accepting of Christians and Jews, and kind of leaves open the possibility of maybe some other levels of acceptance, but that the Hadith have like direct admonishments against the idea of infidels, apostasy, atheism, etc. I think the Quran is actually like directly, it has verses in it that are directly opposed to apostasy, which is a separate thing. But I need to look back into it. Honestly, Islam is one of those things that I researched for a good long while when I was like 16, and I haven't looked back into it much in a few years. But now I feel like I'm more equipped because I've ambiently absorbed a lot more since then. And I feel like, you know, using what base of knowledge I already have, I should probably like read back through the Quran and then maybe find some way to absorb some, because I don't think I could stand to sit and listen to all 10,000 hadith. I just don't think I can do it. But maybe I could find somebody who breaks down the big ones. Basically a very high tax and is just labeled as an outsider. Also, another issue is that the LGBT community is very persecuted in the Middle East. Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, ultimately, my problem with all of these issues in the Middle East is, like, the same problem that makes me oppose the rising tide of Christofascism here in the United States. I don't like it when religion and state intermix. Now, I just have a different solution for that when it comes to the Middle East, and I think that we have a lot to account for when it comes to, like, what we do over there, because, like, we constantly talk about how we're trying to undermine dictators and build up our geopolitical position and all this stuff, but we prop up some dictators over there just as hard as we drag other ones down. Like Saudi Arabia is effectively a dictatorial, authoritarian state, a totalitarian state, ran by religious bigots. It has executed American journalists and just disappeared them, and they've never been held to account for any of that. Osama bin Laden, his entire family's wealth was tied up in the Saudi economy, and it wasn't until 2008, for issues completely unrelated to that involvement, that the family's wealth was finally fucking seized by the Saudi royal family. There are so many reasons why we should want to depose the royal family of Saudi Arabia if we actually cared about getting rid of dictators and guaranteeing peace over there, but we don't. And I don't think that that's how we would go about doing it properly anyway, but I'm just saying if we're going to justify what we do to Iran, or what we did to Iraq, or what we did to Palestine and helping to form Israel, or any of these other interventions under the basis of bringing freedom and democracy to these places that are ruled by despots, then why don't we do it for the ones that we've maintained close allyships with? Well, the reason's obvious, because it's just another way for them to manufacture consent for a war we would otherwise not agree to. Under the Dhimmi, a lot of people under the jizya were forced into paying crippling taxes when the Arabs conquered Egypt from the Romans to native Copts. At first welcomed them, but then rebelled. The Copts rebelled, known as the Bashmurian revolts, due to the oppression, harsh enforcement of a crippling jizya tax, and increasing marginalization under the Abbasid and Umayyad caliphs. Okay, so yeah. So it's not like you're getting killed for being a non-believer or someone from another religion or an atheist or whatever under that old system, but you were basically being oppressed to fuck financially. Yeah, so it's like, what's the real difference? If they're starving you to death or putting a gun to your head, one could argue the gun is actually more merciful. So, alright, well, thank you for helping me learn a little something tonight. I'm going to look into that more, actually. Like I said, this is one of those areas of research I want to do, and I got into it back a few months ago, and I started to get into it, and then my procrastinating ass just fucking got lost in a million other things, and now it's July, and I still haven't put it together. But the war's still going on, or actually it's August now, but the war's still going on, so maybe I could go ahead and start putting together my Iran war video essay, because I want to do like a 2-hour long video, kind of trying to describe, basically, a loose history of the Middle East broadly, Iran more specifically, and our involvement with it over the last 50 years, even more particularly. And I don't know exactly how it's going to end up shaping up, or if it's even going to make for a cogent narrative at the end of the day, but in researching for that, I will have to learn a lot more about the things we're talking about tonight. So maybe I should go ahead and get working on that. The whole thing with Israel, though, has come from an underlying Judeo-Christian truce, for lack of a better term, which I, for one, agree with to an extent, but that stems from personal religious conviction. My thing about Israel is that I don't believe in the rapture, I don't believe in the Christian viewpoint, nor do I believe in legislating on the basis of faith-held beliefs. So I think that it is completely inexcusable what is going on with Israel and Iran and everything. Because in my mind, there are no good justifications. The faith-based justification doesn't work for me because I really don't care whose holy land it is. If it's a million people's holy land, I'm not saying it's literally a million, well, it's actually probably several more than just a million. It's many million people's, billions of people's holy land, if you think about it. If you consider the whole breadth of the religious communities that have deeply held ties to this place. It's not just the Jewish people and the Palestinians and like Muslims more broadly. It's the entire Ummah. So it's all Muslims across the world. It's all of Christendom. So it's all Christians across the world. And it's all of Jewry. So it's all Jewish people. It's like we've got billions of people that consider this place holy. Obviously, they can't all be allowed to live there. So the question of who should be allowed to live there, in my opinion, needs to be based more upon who's there right now and who has been expelled or moved out of there in the last 100 years, and less on, well, who historically descended from this area. Because, like, all of China descends from one specific influx. Are we going to try and fucking fit them all back into that one little spot in Western Asia? Seems pretty hard, you know? So, like, we can't, you know, like, we've got to find better justifications for doing whatever we're going to do with it. And the only other justification besides religious justifications for allowing Israel to expand its borders and allowing Israel to challenge the sovereignty of other nations is because it's going to position us better. It's going to allow us better access to resources. It's going to allow our billionaires to set up more corporations over there and more mining and drilling operations, pipelines, all kinds of crazy shit like that, right? More resorts getting built, all this different stuff. Shipping, ports, everything. They want that. They want it so bad. They've wanted it for decades. They want it for fucking decades. And now, many of them are willing to just talk about it openly. You can say how much you want the resources over there openly. Nobody really gives a shit. Nobody really calls you out. No, it doesn't get brought up that often in the mainstream media, but it's basically like an open secret that this is mainly a war for oil. It's something that the president has said under no uncertain terms. So it's just like, there's no good reason for us to be doing this other than greed and faith, neither of which I find particularly compelling reasons to engage in multinational conflict. Well, I don't think that, if you actually look into it though, I don't think Iran was actually like building towards a nuke. I think that they might have been trying to make it look like they were building up to a nuke, maybe in an effort to look scarier. I don't know why they would want to do that, but even if they were building a nuke, which I think, honestly, to just give you my fair assessment, I think it's like 35-65 building a nuke to not building a nuke. Because they did have the fatwa that was issued by the Ayatollah Khomeini like 20 years ago, something like that, about not building nuclear weapons ever. It seemed like in pretty much all the negotiations that we tried to do with them all the way up to when the JCPOA was finally signed by Barack Obama, they were willing to say, yeah, we're not going to build nukes. That's fine. No nukes. And even if they were, doesn't seem like they were that close to it. And it also doesn't seem like what we're doing is actually targeting their nuclear capacity. You could make an argument that the targeted strike on Fordo might have been an attempt to disable their nuclear program, or an attempt to deal a big blow to it. You could argue that the 11-day war in 2025, maybe, because that was so targeted and specific, and it did specifically target a known Iranian nuclear site. Okay, that I can make sense of. But then somebody wants to tell me that all of these other instances are also examples, and I'm just like, no, like, we're clearly just targeting like a bunch of civilian areas, a multi-use infrastructure, bridges, ports, refineries, shit like this, you know? Like, it's not, I'm not saying, like, I know we're trying to mostly preserve the oil infrastructure, mostly because we want to fucking get a dime out of it, right? But, oh, okay, that's why the chickens were raging. even if Iran had a nuclear weapon, what guarantee do we have that they aren't, like, what guarantee do we have that they're going to use it? Like, for some reason, I don't like this hypocrisy, man. I just don't like this hypocrisy because it feels like something, because at the end of the day, you basically are going to have to cop to, well, it's just might makes right. Because if the argument is, it's not okay for Iran to have nuclear weapons, because even if the person in power right now, which is not really a good argument to make right this second, but let's just say you had someone in power, maybe who's not going to do it, well, Iran might eventually be led by even more extremist people, and they might choose to use the nukes against all kinds of other different people, right? But that same fucking argument can be applied to America. It's not like America's got all that much different about how its structure works when it comes to military power. If the president wants to launch nukes at somebody, he can. Apparently. And basically the only reason why it would be quote-unquote okay for us to have nukes, but not for them to have nukes, it's not because our systems are stronger, because they're any less capable of being abused like that. Ultimately, what you have to fall back on is, well, nobody can take away our nukes, though. And I just, sorry, but not very compelling. Because they're Islamically governed? Bruh. What about Islam means that you're not, what, huh? How does that translate? No, because the U.S. isn't Islamically governed. Yeah, I don't get what Iran being Islamically governed has to do with anything. Like, if we're talking about the possibility of them using nukes, I mean. What is your argument? Just like Muslims be crazy, yo? Do you think that Muslims are inherently any less capable of seeing reason beyond their own fingertips than Christians or Buddhists or any other religious doctrine? We're targeting civilian places because that is where Iran has their base of operations, which is a very clear violation of the Geneva Convention. Yeah, see? The excuses for war crimes abound whenever it's the side of someone who wants to justify their usage, right? Whenever it's the side benefiting. This is the hypocrisy of people who support war, and this, I think, what frustrates me ultimately. I'm not mad at you, I'm not trying to be mean or whatever, but this is the hypocrisy that bothers me so much in conversations with anybody that's pro-war, is for some reason advocates for war are never willing to just be honest and say, yeah, that was really fucked up and awful, and we should have figured out a better way to do this, or you're never willing to just say there's a better way, and there's always a better way. So it just seems like this fundamental kind of speed bump that I can't, almost like a wall of understanding between me and people that feel like the opposite side. Because on my side, I'm like, if you want to destroy their nuclear facilities, target their nuclear facilities. Their nuclear facilities are not hidden underneath hospitals, okay? They're not. It's not how a nuclear facility works, we know where this shit is. We could be targeting it exclusively and specifically. We're not. Instead, we're engaging them in this long-term conflict, and fighting them over the Strait of Hormuz and shit. And I think that it's pretty obviously because it is on some level about destroying Iran's nuclear capacity, but it's on a broader level about trying to destabilize Iran to the point where their government completely falls apart and the people revolt, which might happen, but who's to say that what ends up coming up in the place of the fucking Ayatollah ends up being any better? This is a mistake that the Americans have made many a time. After all, when we deposed the democratically elected Prime Minister of Iran in 1952, a man named Mohammad Mossadegh. We deposed him and installed the Shah of Iran as our Western-backed puppet, and eventually the people rose up against that leader because of his avarice and his corruption and his constant selling out to Western interests, and what they put up was way worse than not just the Shah, but the fucking Prime Minister before him. Because the Prime Minister was actually a cool guy. Democratically elected, pretty socialist type of guy, but not like bad socialist. He was like a good socialist. He wasn't trying to ally with the Soviet Union. He was actually trying to ally with the United States. He wanted to be allies with the U.S. He just wanted higher prices for his oil than we were willing to pay, so we deposed him. And none of this war would have happened if it had not been for the meddling of the United States. It would be completely unnecessary, even under the present shaky grounds that are being defended in chat right now. Oh joy, another train. As if we haven't had enough of those tonight. Why not another one? Why not another fucking 5? Why not another 10? Why don't you just send every train in America by my house? Oil is a huge motivation in this war. Well, at least we agree there. And at the end of the day, I do think that there's a better way to handle this war, but I also believe that if Trump doesn't do it, no one will. I don't know that anyone needs to. I don't believe that they were actually going to use a nuke on anybody just because they got them. And I'll explain why in a minute. What I can tell, nukes in the modern day exist mostly as a deterrent to try and keep people from invading your country or fucking with your country. And it seems to work pretty well, considering North Korea has yet to be invaded by the United States since acquiring nukes. South Africa, like they got nukes, or at least they used to. I don't know if they still do. Israel has nukes and they're crazy as shit. In fact, Israel's plan with their nukes is every bit as venomous and evil as anything you could possibly come up with that the Iranians might have done. Because Israel's plan is, if things get too bad and they feel like they've got no other choice, basically, like they're just being closed down on all sides and they're losing, they will launch all of their nuclear stockpile at all their enemies and just wipe their hands of the matter. Which, of course, it'll, destroy their country just as well as it'll destroy everything around them. But they're basically willing to start nuclear winter over the existence of their country. And for some reason, we're perfectly fine continuing to work with Israel, but we find it appalling, the idea that Iran might even be able to acquire nukes. That seems like a rote hypocrisy to me. Yeah, but we'll never get to that. Yeah, but that's the thing. We're really doing a lot of crystal ball gazing right now. You're gazing into your crystal ball saying, I'm just pretty sure that Iran is going to do some nuclear shit if they're allowed to get nukes. I'm gazing into my crystal ball saying, I don't think so. It just seems like nukes are mostly a deterrent in this modern day. I'm looking in my crystal ball saying, I think Israel means it when they say they have the Samson option. And you're looking into your crystal ball and saying, nah, I don't think so. I don't think it'll actually come to that. Ultimately, none of us know. You're right. It's all guessing on some level. This is what some lefties derisively refer to as theory crafting. But I think there is some utility in it. We know more about each other's positions than we did at the beginning of the conversation, and I think there's some utility to that. I don't know. You say Israel's too powerful, but here's a stat that might shock you a little bit. You know, Israel's had more people leave it this year than any other year in its history. Their highest emigration numbers ever. Like, normally people are moving into Israel. Right now, way more people are moving out. The asymmetrical warfare pattern of Islamic religion scares me, honestly. Well, if it makes you feel any better, thank you, Little Joe DMC, for joining the membership. I appreciate that a ton. If it makes you feel any better, asymmetric warfare is not just something you need to worry about coming out of Islamic countries. It's actually something that America mastered on a mass scale even before, even before the Islamic world started to take their mastery of it on a small scale and apply it to the large scale. It's one of the reasons why, right, that's one of the reasons why the American military ends up being so well matched against Middle Eastern opponents, is because we're both big fans of asymmetrical warfare. We both like to do unconventional shit. That's something I should have asked Joey about. Should have been like, when you were in the desert, genuinely, how did you feel about the enemy combatants? Like, did you feel like you were going up against, clever enemies, or did they seem stupid, or what's the vibe? We do it much cleaner, though, than they do. Well, we've had a lot more time to master modern technology, and we've got a lot more money behind what we're doing, too, so, It's a little easier to be cleaner about it when you've got a lot more modern and efficient logistics behind you. I would also argue that we don't always do it more cleanly. Sometimes we just do it in ways that seem more clean to us, but ultimately, morally, what is the difference between an A-10 Warthog drawing down on an enemy position and lighting it up like a Christmas tree, and an IED placed along the roadside on a road that is pretty much known to have very recently been under enemy control? I feel like the placing of mines, booby traps, and things like that is a pretty standard practice in warfare. And I don't know that it's actually meaningfully any more or less honorable or whatever than, flying down on an enemy with absolutely no air support with a giant warbird firing 1,000 shots a minute, or whatever, however many it is. I think a lot of times perspective plays a lot into how we perceive these things. I think we tend to perceive American military action as cleaner, not just because we're doing it, but because we're doing it with more modern technology, and usually in ways that involve less like on the ground combat or direct hand-to-hand engagement or that kind of thing. It's increasingly less common for us to use those sorts of tactics, or at least to rely on them. And I think that that often leads to a perception that we've got a more cleaner, accurate, more efficient military machine. But ultimately, I can't imagine that it feels much different for those schoolgirls that died in that girls' school in Iran during the first week of the conflict. I can't imagine that they felt their deaths were any cleaner or more honorable than the death of any soldier blown up by an IED in the many inadvisable foreign adventures we've engaged in the last 20 years. I feel like a lot of times when it comes to war, the morality of war, at best, it's a wash. Usually civilians get hurt more often in Islamic attacks. I think that that may be a trend that doesn't hold up as much anymore, honestly, friend. Because, like, America has been real bad about civilian deaths and, people that are unrelated to the conflict. And another thing that also happens, and you might disagree with me on this, you might say I'm wrong or I'm lying or whatever, but I promise I'm not. America has been proven to have lied a number of times about the connections that a group of people killed in a given conflict had to a movement. Like, there have been times when, like 100 people have died in an attack, and they claim that there's only like 18 civilians that died, but then people have gone through and looked and interviewed people in that community and gone into it and seen like how true this is, and it actually turns out that it's more like 67 civilians were killed, and they just counted a lot of those civilians as combatants with, Pentagon logic, basically, and White House math. So I feel like that needs to be taken into consideration as well. But even leaving that aside, even the numbers we have reported of the amount of civilian deaths caused by American military equipment and tactics and deployments, it's still way higher than you would want out of any civilized nation. Yeah, I agree. Good. Good. I'm glad we agree. I just think we tend to want to give ourselves a lot of leeway on stuff like this, and I don't really feel the need to, because I don't feel like it's a personal indictment of me if my government did some stuff like that. I just think it means that, it's certainly something I'm going to think about when I go to the voting booth. Go to the voting booth, for example. It's certainly something I'm going to think about if I'm having a political discussion and talking about what policies might be ideal. Damn, I don't remember what I was going to say now. Okay, here's a question. Okay, cool. Who the fuck is this? Who the fuck is this? Anyway. Who would you rather have in office, Biden or Trump, and why? Man, that's a hard question. And I say it's hard because I know that Joe Biden is too old and too unhealthy to have been all that much better in terms of like actually being like good and yay, we're doing positive things rather than just letting things continue to slip into financialization and the ruin of the working class. That said, I don't think that so here's the thing. Joe Biden and Donald Trump both would probably have eventually engaged Iran. I think that Biden would have eventually been, I think his mind would have been putting eventually at a certain point enough for Netanyahu to talk him into doing it. And it just so happens that Trump ended up being the one that finally got talked into it. Although notably, Netanyahu tried to, attempted apparently to talk Biden into attacking Iran during Biden's presidency, and it didn't work out. So maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe the Iran war wouldn't have been happening. I don't know. That said, Kamala Harris did say that Iran was our chief international enemy in all this, and I think that speaks volumes. So when it comes to this particular conflict, I don't know that they would have had policy that would have been that different. When it comes to Gaza and the genocide in Palestine, I don't know that Joe Biden, I see no reason why I should believe that he would have any different position if we'd given him 4 more years than he did in his first 4 years. That doesn't make any sense to me. Like, why would he just suddenly change on that matter and suddenly start really pressuring Israel to stop the genocide and start making reparations and rebuilding Gaza? I don't think that would have happened under either of them. So really, it's like a matter of a few basic things. Basically, a few things that we know Biden and Trump would have done differently. We know that Joe Biden wouldn't have done a bunch of horrible anti-trans stuff. We know that Joe Biden definitely would have been trying or allowing his staffers or lending his image to the idea of Democratic victories and local elections and state elections and things like that. So I think I'm going to have to land on Biden, but it's just barely. I mean, I'm not going to play it up like it's some kind of, obviously it's Biden. I think that it's actually important that people like me on the left and other people recognize that obviously on some level the Democrat is usually going to be better than the Republican, and I think pretty much every time at a national level. But better is usually just it usually just means they're not going to be as bad, and that's a very powerful distinction. I think we need somebody altogether different than Biden or Trump or Kamala or Hillary for that matter. I think we need an actual Bernie type politician to be able to get to the national stage. Not only do I think they would win, but I think that they would get a lot of positive change done. I'm kind of new to chat, so forgive me if I'm wrong. No, you're fine, totally fine. Good question. She dislikes Biden also, right? Yeah, no, I'm not a fan of Biden or Trump, so it's oh God, I did vote for Biden in 2020 though, so I guess I can't front I have never been convinced by the argumentation. So that's my answer. Thoughts on Charlie Kirk? Oof, this is where you're gonna get real mad at me. I have a baseline kind of thing I say about this. Charlie Kirk was a backwards, bigoted moron who nevertheless did not deserve to be shot dead like a dog on the street. Plainly and obviously. Assassinations are stupid and immoral. They are wrong. They deprive other people of their humanity, often for reasons no better justified than a bit of unconventional or erroneous or hateful speech, things that are better corrected for with better arguments and better presentation than they ever have been with bullets, swords, or any of the other implements of violence that humanity has conceived of over the many centuries. I think that assassinations tend to have the opposite of their intended effect, as evidenced by the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., who was killed by Billy Ray Earl in a attempt to silence the Black Liberation Movement and the Civil Rights Movement by destroying one of their chief advocates. Instead, what ended up happening is the riots that ensued after that assassination were what enabled Lyndon B. Johnson to finally get Congress to act on the Fair Housing Act, which was the final civil rights bill of the 1960s. So it had literally the opposite effect of what Billy Ray Earl intended. Same thing with Medgar Evers' assassination in the 1950s, killed by a Klansman who did end up getting away with it for quite a long time. But even in that instance, it produced the opposite reaction of what the Klansman intended. It ended up being a rallying cry for the civil rights movement. Similarly, Charlie Kirk's death was probably meant to kind of try and cut the head off the snake of the conservative movement and weaken it and fracture it. And I think what it did was take an already fracturing movement and glue it back together for a time. And it actually caused, I think, a lot more people to sour to the left and get this idea that there's some kind of violent tendency amongst us that is broadly applied on the basis of opinion alone that I don't think actually reflects the truth of the average American leftist. I think that the average American leftist is a bit more likely to make fun of some conservative that dies than maybe some conservative individuals would be to make fun of a leftist who dies, but I don't know if that's even true. And I would also say that there's a big difference between making fun of somebody who died or saying you don't care or whatever, and actively thinking that it's like okay to go kill people. So that's how I feel about it. I don't think he should have gotten shot. I'm also not exactly sad by the loss, but I think it speaks volumes to the incredibly high amount of tension that exists around political conversations right now. Compared to the YouTube comments I've seen, you are very respectful in regards to Charlie. It saddens me to see that people celebrate the death of a husband and a father. Well, that's kind of how I look at it too. I mean, it doesn't sicken me to see the celebrations on some level, because I think that there are people who are members of communities who genuinely have been materially harmed by the advocacy of people like Charlie Kirk and people informed by his advocacy. So I can understand why somebody in that position would be kind of grimly making fun of the death of somebody like that. But on the other hand, it's also impossible for me to forget someone's humanity, no matter how shitty of a person they are. On some level, I can't watch that video without getting shudders and feeling a little sick to my stomach, because on some level I know that that's not just some conservative chud dying on stage, but that's like a human being who had a life that he probably enjoyed. He seemed like a dude who was genuinely happy, I'll say that. He seemed like one of the only conservative media figures who was actually happy and enjoyed his life on some level. And just to think, like, it's not just this public speaker that said a lot of inflammatory, in some cases quite hateful things. It's also like a human being that by all accounts was a pretty personable, generous, compassionate person in his everyday personal life, that had kids and a wife. And I can't imagine, dying at so young with my kids. I mean, I've got a son, he's only a little over a year and a half, and I can't imagine, you know. What are your thoughts on abortion? Let me see. Did you know Bernie was once part of a commune but was kicked out after 3 days for talking too much, not putting his fair share of work in? I've never heard that before. I would have to, have some verisimilitude on that. But it's funny, talking too much and not putting his fair share of work in. That sounds... I will admit that sounds like a familiar pattern. Having done some rainbow gatherings and some commune type stuff myself. Oh, what are your thoughts on abortion? I understand why people are kind of grossed out about it and why people get kind of emotional about it, but ultimately I am pro-choice, even when it comes to late-term abortions, because as a person who's had a kid myself and as a person who had to go through what some people would call a natural abortion with the same person I had my child with before we had our kid, I've seen both sides of it, and I would not want anyone to not be able to get the care they need, because when it comes to abortions in the first 2 or 3 months, that is almost always a matter of people trying to look out for their own health on top of the health of the child proactively before things get so far along that it becomes an object of emotional attachment. And a ton of abortions, honestly, the vast majority of them are what you would call medicine abortions, where someone is just taking a pill, the morning after pill, or something else to to induce a a shedding of the uterine liner and the egg along with it, and any sperm that may have gotten trapped or anything else. It's just we're gonna do a flush now. That's the majority of abortions that are performed, and then abortions that are performed outside of that, I either way, I think it needs to be left up to a person's choice. But I think that it becomes even more critical the more you think about some of these things. Okay, so for example, late-term abortion. Nobody gets a late-term abortion because they just decide they don't want the kid. By the time you get to the 6-month mark, you're already very obviously pregnant. And by the time you get to the 9-month mark or the 8-month mark or the 7th-month mark, you're every month up to 9, you look more and more like you're just about to pop, especially if you're a smaller person. And nobody wants to get rid of that pregnancy. The reason why sometimes people have to is because something goes wrong. Some horrible birth defect is detected, and it's understood that it's going to be a stillbirth, or that the infant is going to die a horrible, cruel death within 3 or 4 hours, existing basically only to scar its mother with the memory of its face. And that's, why would you ever wish that on a mom? Why would you ever wish that on a little baby? 4 hours of miserable, screaming, clawing life as they desperately fight to hold on to a life that they can't live because they've got a genetic abnormality that means that their lungs didn't form right, and there's no possible surgery to fix it, so they just have to sit there drowning in their own fluids for 4 hours. Fuck that. Fuck that. Fuck that. You're telling me that that's more humane? Not you in particular. I'm just saying the person who's strongly anti-abortion in all instances is telling me that that is a more humane death than having a drug injected into the fetus that basically makes it just drift off into sleep and into unconsciousness and then into death, and then like that seems so much more obviously humane to me. And it only ever happens when there's some horrible abnormality like that. So when people bring it up, I bristle a little bit. Because ultimately I think that very often pleas and calls to humanity and the preciousness of human life are made to justify the anti-abortion position. But the more you learn about abortion, the more you learn about birth defects, the more you realize that the anti-abortion position is actually the position that, from what I can tell, seems to have a problem with babies. What about all the babies murdered in the womb for convenience sake? Well, number one, I wouldn't call it a murder, because murder is unjustified killing, and I think that you are perfectly within your rights to kill something that is growing within you and will only survive if you, like, continue to provide it material nutrients, like, directly through your body, you know? Like, I just, you know, like, I think that that's something that we have to allow people to have the right to do. Like, there's no two ways about it. You have autonomy over your body, and no one, including a fetus inside your body, has a right to take that away from you. I don't think fetuses have more rights than pregnant people. So as far as infants, or well, not infants, but as far as fetuses that are killed within the womb, thank you, Ignar Husky, for subscribing to the membership. I appreciate that a ton. Nice to see you over here, Ignar. Hell yeah. But as far as people that kill the fetus for convenience sake, you know, like perform an abortion just for convenience sake, my response to that is always, do you really want to foist a baby on someone who is so convinced they don't want to have, like, think about that. Like, if a person's like, I don't want to have a baby, I don't want to take care of a baby, fuck a baby, why would you want them to have a baby? They should have the same right. The fetus does have the same right. It just doesn't have any ability to hold extra rights over the pregnant person. You see how that works? So, like, the pregnant person has every right to decide, like, what their body is used for. And a person does not have a right. A person that's just walking around does not have a right to, like, knock that person out. Like, okay, let me put it this way. Let's just take me and you. Neither of us are pregnant, okay? I hope. Neither of us are pregnant. I cannot walk up to you, knock you out, and take you to a hospital and have them, like, hook you up to me so that I can party as hard as I want to and all of my blood passes through your body first so that you can be my, like, life support vessel. I can't do that. I can't just, like, surreptitiously use your body for my own benefit. Like, even if I'm dying, even if I was dying and you were the only person who could save my life, but to do so, it meant that you were going to have to, like, sit there in a bed for 8 hours and have my blood ran through you, I could not compel you to do that. And you would not be a murderer for refusing to help. You might be seen as a bit of a douchebag, depending on who you're talking to. You know, my mom's probably not going to like you very much, but you would not be a murderer. Adoption isn't always an option because there are millions of kids in the foster care system or in various stages of the like the system in general, just like desperately looking for someone to take them in long term and being shuffled around halfway houses and foster homes and shit like that. It's no bueno. Hence why it's important for the woman to have maximum autonomy so they don't have to be forced to do something they don't want to do for another life, for themselves especially. Exactly. The woman took an action to have sex and she should have to deal with that responsibility that comes with that action. What about instances of rape? Not only that, but what about instances where the condom fails? What about instances where a woman is sexually assaulted by consenting to sex with someone with a penis that is fertile, but then that person with a penis that is fertile surreptitiously removes the condom without them being aware? What if they poke holes in the condom? I can think of a million different scenarios that might lead to an unintended pregnancy by someone who is not ready and who was trying their best. And in that instance, you're basically just saying we should foist pregnancies and childbirth and all this other shit upon people because they wanted to do a natural human activity? That doesn't make any sense to me. We already tried forcing people in to lifelong marriages where they hate each other just because they fucked and had kids. It was called the 1950s, and you talk to any kid that was raised in that era, their dad was a drunk that beat them every day, and their moms too. Their moms hated them their whole lives, died penniless and wishing for better. I don't know. I don't want to go back to that system. I kind of like how it is now, when people that get with somebody that they realize is a piece of shit can leave them, and when two people realize they're just not working out, they can break up. Like, for example, me and my ex, we weren't married when we had our kid, and we broke up before he was even a year old. He was like 9 months old, I think, when me and her broke up. And it was not like a harsh breakup. It wasn't exactly mutual, but it wasn't anything specifically that I was doing. It was just like our life visions ultimately were incompatible in ways that we didn't really realize when we had our son. But we work it out, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. And in fact, I think the way it works out is actually better because I'm able to have a family, but I'm also able to reconcile that with building a life that I can believe in and be an active participant in and a happy part of. See, just a Potterhead, you're getting like really emotional and passionate about this, and ultimately what you're getting emotional and passionate about is the right of a fetus that is doomed to die being born to a mom who is traumatized forever by the memory of a child who is never going to live to even see the toddler years, let alone graduation from high school. And you're saying that that's all right, because we've got to make sure that we really crack down on all these whores. Well, I'm sorry, but I'm not so interested in policing people's sexuality that I'm willing to prohibit abortion on the basis of that. Heartbeat starts at 6 weeks. Deer have heartbeat. I have no problem with shooting a deer right between its fucking eyes, stripping the hide from its body, packing it into a bag, stripping its guts from its body, hanging it up by its ankles, and stripping every ounce of meat from its bones, then whittling the bones into toys. The mere fact that that deer has a heartbeat doesn't stop me, doesn't make me pause. What are you telling me I should stop shooting deer too? See, the fact that I know you're a conservative means that I can use allegories I know you'll relate to immediately. I don't give a shit if a thing has a heartbeat. I give a shit that if it's whether it's got like a natural right to do the behavior we're describing. It doesn't. Nobody, including a fetus, has a right to use another human being's body against their will. Therefore, if the person whose body you are utterly reliant on to survive decides, no, I don't want to do that shit no mo, sorry, man. It's just kind of how it goes. Obviously, there's a moral responsibility that mothers and fathers have to their children after they are born, or that they at least have to deliver them up to an appropriate adoption agency. Of course, there's like some responsibilities that come with actually having a kid, but I don't think the mere act of having sex, especially given the many different myriad circumstances in which people have that sex, should be a life sentence. What if it has human DNA? The pancreas, you know how many things have human DNA? Cancer has human DNA. Cancer has human DNA. We don't have any fucking problem with snipping around in people's bodies and getting that shit out. The fucking placenta has human DNA, but we throw away 1 million placentas a day. My fucking fingernails have human DNA, and I snip them off every 2 weeks so I can play the guitar. Man, can you not be all caps? I don't want to time you out. It's equivalent to yelling. It is really weird, you know? I'm not all capsing in my voice. I'm just like responding with a little bit of humor in my voice. But man, you are like passionate, dog. You are like into this argument. You make the point without caps lock. That's all we're saying, is you can make the point without caps lock. I don't necessarily agree we are talking about a human life. We have yet to demonstrate that, like, fetuses have anything like what we would call active sentience. Maybe at some point we'll be able to demonstrate that, but even then, I think even if you were to grant fetuses personhood, you still have yet to provide me with a good moral reason why one type of people should have more rights than another type of people. And you keep skirting around the question every time it gets brought up, so I guess I'm just going to have to keep bringing it up. What makes it okay for a fetus to use someone's body without their consent because the state wills it to be so, but it would not be okay for anyone else to do that? If the logic anti-abortion people use were applied to like all of human society, then there would be like organ donors basically regularly getting rounded up and like having like, I'm sorry, you got 2 kidneys, but there's people out there that need your kidneys a lot more than you do, and you're actually a murderer if you protest against us taking your kidneys out because human life is sacred and you need to like put your body to use supporting the bodies of others. Like, yeah, I don't think you would support that. I think you would recognize that as cruel and dystopian. But for some reason, when it comes to protecting the rights of hypothetical fetuses in the wombs of hypothetical pregnant people, you're very willing to insert the monopoly of violence that the state possesses. You're willing to insert state force in between a woman and her doctor, or anyone who's pregnant and their doctor. And I just don't get that. I don't agree with that. I'm never going to agree with that. I've seen one of my cats poop an aborted fetus in the litter box one time as a kid. Yep. I just want to ask, like, Potter, my partner that I had a kid with, before we had a kid, our first pregnancy ended in blighted ovum. You ever heard of blighted ovum? See, the problem with abortion legislation is that very often it ends up targeting people like that too. And so even a person who, like, doesn't have a baby growing in them, who basically had a baby growing in them and then their body reabsorbed it but didn't fully get the message, so kept making amniotic fluid and kept their profile, their hormone profile, relatively the same. Like, those people can't get abortions either whenever you start outlawing abortions en masse. This is what just happens. This is how it works. You end up with millions of people nationwide who need abortions for various reasons, some of which are like literally just complete necessity and some of which are life necessity. And because none of them can get them, you end up with way more abandoned babies. You end up with way more mistreated kids. You end up with way more suicidal and depressed and single moms. There's so many social issues associated with forcing people who don't want to be pregnant. Then another thing you end up with is a lot of people who die because they just can't get the abortion care they need, and abortion care is what they need to not die. Like there's something wrong with the pregnancy, and if they don't get it aborted, they're going to fucking die. That happens to people in places where abortion is illegal. Happens in massive numbers. And we're just supposed to like ignore all that and leave that alone and not care about any of that because you care more about the life of a fetus growing in someone than you do about that person. What is blighted ovum? It's basically when you're you get pregnant, cell division starts, the amniotic sac and everything builds, the amniotic fluid starts building up, and then for some reason we don't quite understand why it happens in every instance. There's usually extensive testing required that's pretty expensive in order to tell why it happened in any given instance, but for some reason cell division stops. The placenta that was starting to emerge and the dividing cells are reabsorbed by the body, basically. But for reasons that we also don't fully understand, the body doesn't quite get the message. So hormone levels often stay around the levels of a pregnant person, sometimes dipping down eventually, but the body continues to produce amniotic fluid and often continues to give the pregnant person the symptoms of pregnancy, despite the fact that there's nothing growing inside of them. It's been reabsorbed by their body. We discovered this when we went for their, I think it was their 12-week ultrasound, fully expecting to see the outline of a beautiful little baby being in there. And we looked at the ultrasound monitor. Nothing but noise and a very clearly distended but empty uterus. The solution to blighted ovum is an abortion. And in our particular case, that meant I helped them insert 2 pills into their vagina, and we laid down for about 4 hours before the pain got so intensely severe that we had to rush to the hospital a few hours before they were actually due to go in for the DNC. When we finally got there, they were administered morphine because the pain was so horrible. Mind you, this is only, like 3 months in, I think. The pain was horrific. They had to be administered morphine. And they've got a pretty high pain tolerance, so that was pretty incredible on its own. When eventually they did finally have the procedure done, the mix of emotions after they finally came down from the morphine high and we got some food in our bellies was massively intense. And we almost broke up a couple of times in the intervening weeks because the amount of pressure that they felt and the amount of like they were so torn up by that because they thought, seriously, like, what if they're not able to get pregnant? What if I'm not able to do this, etc.? And whenever people talk about outlawing abortion because of abortions of convenience and all this shit, I just think about how that is pretty much the experience of anyone who gets an abortion in the early stages of pregnancy. It's a horribly painful procedure that is traumatizing in so many different ways, even if it is what needs to happen. Not even necessarily because of what you might think, but for all kinds of different reasons. And nobody is going to choose to go through with that over and over and over again rather than just using birth control. Number one, it's expensive. Number two, it's painful and kind of traumatizing. Number three, it involves like overnight stays at the hospital and shit. Number four, abortions are increasingly harder to get in more and more of the United States. And number five, birth control is more easy to use and simple to access these days than ever before. So the idea of outlawing abortion because you're worried that some people might be out there fucking too much and getting pregnant and getting abortions so they don't have to have a kid, and you've got some moral problem with that, just seems like cruelty to me, because you're basically asking for those few people for whom birth control fails or that fuck up and make some mistake in the heat of passion should be subject to the rest of their lives for responsibilities that they never wanted, and that we have the technology to prevent them from being subjected to. Not only that, but it seems incredibly cruel to me to just put a bunch of kids into the system because we've got some moral issue about like ending the life of a fetus before it's got the chance to feel, experience, or remember anything. I don't know if she will for this evening, Mom Potter. Stick around and ask for another time. You'll certainly have a chance. I don't think it's immature to have sex whenever you want. What problem do you have with people having as much sex as they want to? Like, what problem? Like, what business is it of yours? Better in the system than dead? No, it is not. It is literally not better in the system than dead. That's the most cruel thing I can possibly think of. You're talking about, like, it's better for you to torture this person with the woes of existing in a system that is built to make them suffer than it is for them to be eliminated from the possibility of even being able to experience the reality of suffering. That doesn't make a goddamn lick of sense. I also think it's interesting, you're so convinced that every every fetus necessarily wants to live, and every person wants to live and all this, but I know antinatalists that have said that it would have been better for the world and for like them if they had just been aborted. They're not going to like end their own lives because they're not suicidal, but I know people who basically make the argument that they themselves would at least have been fine being aborted because they wouldn't have been able to experience it anyway. Try to remember the time before your birth. Oh, that's right, you can't. None of us can. That's because you don't have conscious experiences until you, like, start breathing outside the womb. There's some pretty compelling evidence that people do start having conscious experiences once they're breathing outside the womb, but there's not very good compelling evidence that people have any conscious experiences when they're developing inside. Sorry. And even if they did, I am still not going to grant fetuses more rights than I'm going to grant your average everyday person. I don't think your average everyday adult walking down the street has a right to just subject anyone they want to the use of their body for, like 9 months. I don't think that a fetus should have that right. I don't think that I've got the right to like sign you up for 9 months of body slavery to support me and my existence, like at the threat of state force, and I don't think that a fetus should be able to do the same thing either. Sorry, we're just not going to see eye to eye on this. It is a fundamental axiom of mine. I mean, I don't know if it's a fundamental axiom, but it's definitely it's based on a fundamental axiom, which is that societies that deny people abortion rights tend to have way higher rates of child poverty, way higher rates of infant mortality, way higher rates of maternal mortality. And ultimately, I believe in improving the condition of the human species and reducing suffering. I don't care what visceral image you try to paint and conjure to guilt me out of my position on abortion. I don't care if they have to take a fucking blender up in there. I don't care if they have to stick a fucking shop vac up her pussy. I'm still going to say that it is better for someone to be able to control for what uses their body is used than it is for them to be subjugated to birth slavery by the state. Sorry, I don't believe in women being broodmares. I don't believe in people that are capable of being pregnant in general being broodmares for the state. I don't believe in people being compelled by state force to carry pregnancies they don't want to carry. Sorry, I'm just never going to believe that. Yeah, you're trying to override the rights of a person who is pregnant in favor of the rights of a person who's not even around yet. And once again, you still have not answered for me why it's a problem for people to have as much fucking sex as they want to. Unless you're going to make the argument because I don't think abortion should be legal and, people aren't going to do birth control, so yada, yada, yada. Like, nah, bro. Like, sorry, most people do use birth control these days. Tons and tons and tons of people use birth control successfully. And a ton of abortions that happen are, like, abortions that happen with the Plan B pill or something like that because somebody that rarely has sex decides, fuck it, I'm going to have sex. And then the person that they're having sex with comes in them despite them saying not to or whatever. And they're like, just to be safe, I'm going to do a Plan B. And in a lot of cases, they're not even doing functionally an abortion because in a lot of cases, fertilization ain't even occurred yet. It's just like a precautionary measure that forces that to not happen. Oh, so Ignar. I've watched videos of it. I've seen the propaganda videos. I still believe exactly what I believe. I've seen all the videos that are meant to convince women not to do abortions, okay? I've seen them. I still think I'm still pro-choice, okay? I'm sorry. Anyway, with that being said, Ignar, now I'm gonna, and I don't want to hop in a Discord call right now. I'm fucking getting tired. I've got other shit I need to do today, and there's like hardly anybody in here right now, so we can do it another time. But Ignar, so Kenny was talking about doing an Airbnb, and he was talking about how he's gonna be like coming on Friday and leaving on Sunday. And I think that the meetup is on Friday. I'm not sure if he realizes that. I'm going to have to check and make sure they realize that. I'm going to have to do some coordination, but it seems like I might actually need to crash at your place. Maybe. I'll see. There's a chance, though. So we might be able to hang out in Portland for a day or two after all. Besides that, honestly, Potter, with like all the all caps you've been doing in chat, I kind of feel like you just gonna end up yelling at me. And I don't know. I already had 4 hours worth of like really interesting conversation with a conservative who wasn't yelling at me, and I feel like if I'm gonna be yelled at, I probably want to get a re-up first. But not only that, like I said, I've got other things I need to do today. At this point, I mostly just want to see Ignar, see that message. Oh shit, well let's work out the deets when we can. I agree. Anyway, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and go. Thank you guys for hanging out, as usual. I appreciate it a ton. I will see you guys later. I'll let my roommate know too, but he's seen your shit and likes you too, so I think he'd definitely be cool with it. Awesome. Hell yeah. I'm sure we'll have lots of cool conversations. We'll smoke up. It'll be dope. Oh, I can't wait. Peace.